Hey everybody, thanks for joining. We had a great discussion today on the 5 keys to XDR strategy success. We're going to go into detail about what this is all about, but at first, a couple housekeeping things. Please engage. There's a Q&A box. Feel free to capture some questions over the course of the presentation. We'll happily address those at the end. And then if additional resources are needed, there's a resources box at the bottom of the page. The links might not be working for some reason. And if they're not working for you, just, hey, feel free to ping me, email me at woj@vectra.ai, and I'll be happy to get those resources to you if those links aren't working for you. So without further ado, just so you know who you're talking to. My name is Mark Wataziak. People call me Woj, as you can tell from the spelling of the last name. I lead the product marketing team here at Vectra AI. Always looking forward to connecting with security peeps like yourselves. So feel free to ping me via email, connect on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever you see fit. I'm happy to continue the conversation after we get done with this session. So what are we going to cover today? Today is about better threat detection and response. We're going to dissect. We spent some time in the latest Gartner Hype Cycle for security operations and dissected that in a number of ways, and wanted to share some of our key takeaways from that. And so you'll see us kind of break this discussion up into three parts. One being rooted in, okay, what's the problem set, right? And what does the hype cycle tell us about the problem set that SOCs are facing today? We're going to center that around threat detection and response. What are some of the key takeaways from the hype cycle? And then offer up Vectra's perspective on 5 keys to achieving better threat detection and response. We're going to root this in XDR and talk a little bit about what it means relative to the XDR conversation in the market today. We'll wrap it up, and then we'll do some Q&A towards the end. So if that sounds good to everybody, let's get rolling. First thing, I always like to lead with the problem statement. So in the hype cycle, Gartner articulates the problem and the need. And there's a lot of words on the screen. I'm not going to read them to you. But fundamentally, we're obviously facing and evolving in a diverse set of exposures and risks. But what it boils down to is, and what Gartner is saying in this problem statement is, heck, we need better visibility and control, right? Fundamentally, that's what the hype cycle aims to address, and the many different ways to address that problem and that need. We like to simplify that a little bit, and this is the problem statement that Vectra kind of centers itself on. And kind of when we look at research from Gartner and others, and we think about what security operations is up against, what organizations are up against. And it's fundamentally this very simple problem statement. And we hear this over and over from customers and people like yourselves that we talk to. We don't know where we're compromised right now, right? Just keep the problem statement super simple. And we would argue that the need goes beyond visibility and control, and we'll start breaking these things down, right? So there's a definite need as you read through the hype cycle around coverage. We need better coverage, better threat visibility, if you will. There's needs around clarity and prioritization. Controls are always a need. But if you read between the lines, there's also needs around reducing complexity, improving competency, and then obviously increasing the confidence, the success of security operations, right? Are they successful in not only detecting but responding to a diverse set of attacks and threats that are happening to the organization. So we're going to root a lot of the conversation in, and we don't know where we're compromised right now, and what is Gartner? How does Gartner see how do we see Gartner's perspective relative to that problem set? They call it visibility control. We call it the unknown compromise. So fundamentally, what we would argue is as you read through the hype cycle, there's this underlying need for better, not necessarily more. And what does better threat detection and response look like? And in the Gartner perspective, in their hype cycle, better is all about effective strategy, right? Efficient and effective response and remediation to a diverse set of threats, right? Doing it in a way that reduces complexity, improves the competency of the SOC and the SOC analyst, and then thus increasing confidence that the security team, security organization, security people, process, and technologies, the overarching security strategy, can protect the organization. If you read the definition, if we consider the definition of XDR, in extended detection and response, it's about rapidly and efficiently hunting and eliminating threats across multiple domains. So when we think about that, we think XDR is fundamentally a better threat detection response. Threat detection and response provides better coverage, better clarity, and better control. So we're going to go through the course of this presentation, discussion, just breaking that down, right? So let's start with some definitions, the path. So when we were reading through Gartner Hype, and I'm guilty of reading this thing about 3 times. It's like 60 some pages, I think, at least that. And it's fantastic. But what Gartner highlights in the Hype is 3 fundamental questions, and we were able to link these to this notion of coverage, clarity, and control. First question. What does my organization look like from an attacker's point of view? What does the attacker see? Right? How do we think like an attacker? How do we see what the attacker sees? Second question, how should my organization find and prioritize the issues that attackers will see first, or that the issues or compromises that are already existing at the hands of an attacker? That's what we call clarity. Keyword there being prioritized. And then finally, what would happen if an attacker carried out a campaign against my organization's infrastructure? What would our processes look like? What would our defenses look like, et cetera? How would we remediate, investigate, and respond to that? And that we call control, right? How does the SOC regain control of attacks earlier in the process? And fundamentally, when we think about the definition of XDR, if you break XDR down into coverage, clarity, and control, and you answer these 3 questions, fundamentally, we're talking about a path to better threat detection and response, better TDR. So in our nomenclature, we're going to kind of talk about simplistically saying, you know what, XDR is just better threat detection and response. What's the path to better threat detection and response? So we're going to break these down in some key ways, and I'll walk through that in a second. So first, what does the landscape look like? So there are a number of detection and response technologies, and they're all covered in the hype cycle, from network detection and response, so NDR, and Gartner kind of tucks some of the cloud detection and response into the NDR capabilities as NDR network detection and response products like Vectra's also encompasses CDR, so public cloud, SaaS applications, et cetera. Emerging threat detection and response category that is ITDR, so identity threat detection and response. We all know that there's endpoint, EDR, managed, and of course extended XDR. And what's interesting about this hype cycle is you look at not only where it is in the cycle, but look at, I paid a particular attention to when will the plateau of productivity be reached. And what's interesting is EDR is obviously there. It's less than 2 years. It's very ingrained technology. A lot of companies are using it, looking at using it, expanding it, et cetera. But look at the other categories, particularly identity, managed, and NDR. NDR is quickly approaching mainstream, slope of enlightenment into the plateau of productivity. But look at MDR and ITDR. They're in the same vein, 2 to 5 years away. So when I think about this, I think about, wow, are these ideal near-term paths to better threat detection and response, aka what we would refer to as XDR. So we looked at it through that lens, right? So we looked at it through the lens of, if you're a security professional, leader, SOC leader, practitioner, architect, where does the near-term value exist in terms of investment in technology? So according to Gartner, this is how it breaks down. So we looked at, less than 2 years, 2 to 5, 5 to 10, over 10. But what point does it reach that plateau of productivity? And we honed in on, the 2 to 5 year horizon. And there are a number of, obviously, technologies in this space. And we said, okay, here's where the near term incremental value exists for the security leader, builder, and practitioner. So you can see identity, threat detection, response, digital forensics, et cetera, et cetera. What we then did say, okay, let's hone in and center ourselves back on the problem, right? So if you remember at the beginning, the problem set was, we don't know where we're compromised right now, right? So let's address that problem. And when we think about the path to better TDR, how do we begin to think about the 5 keys? And I'm going to break these 5 keys down. So if you remember at the beginning, we talked about coverage, clarity, and control, complexity, competency, and confidence. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at technologies in that 2 to 5 year horizon and how they address each one of these 6 things, right? And we're going to look at it in 3 simple ways. I'm a sucker for alliteration, you can see with the C's and the P's. But we're going to break down the 5 keys in kind of three areas. Pain. What specific pain is the problem presenting? The problem being, we don't know what we're compromised right now. We'll break each one of these 5 down by path. So what technology paths exist to address that buyer pain, and which ones are best at addressing that buyer pain? And then third, what are the buyer's valued outcomes? What are the results? What ultimately do buyers want out of an investment in a technology? So, and when I say buyers, I'm talking about all of you, security leaders, practitioners, builders, in terms of like value outcomes. So this is the way we approach this, and I'm going to break each one of these down one by one, and this is kind of our takeaways and our perspectives on what this path to an XDR strategy, path to better TDR looks like. So, first one. Coverage. So if we root ourselves in the core problem, we call it the unknown, and we began to ask ourselves, okay, relative to this problem, we don't know where we're compromised right now, right? So nearly 3/4 of leaders will say they think they've been breached, but we don't know, right? So fundamentally, let's just center ourselves on this problem set. And when we looked across the hype cycle, and Gartner summed it up quite well, this is the pain that jumped out, right? An increasingly diverse set of exposures and risks that organizations need to gain better visibility over. Okay, so this is the coverage problem statement or pain statement. Now, if you look at the 2 to 5 year horizon, so which technologies are in the 2 to 5 year horizon, you see 4 that address this pain, this visibility pain. So identity, threat detection and response, digital risk protection services, NDR, and then threat intel products and services. We then dug a little deeper and said, okay, which technologies does Gartner say offer the highest near-term benefit? And we bolded those, right? So it was ITDR, DRPS, and NDR. And then we thought about, okay, what's the ultimate payback? Which one of these technologies deliver on the pain, right? Address the pain the closest, right? So here's where ITDR and NDR shine, right? So what is my, then this is what we commonly call unified attack visibility at Vectra. So can you get unified visibility to threats across the attack surface, right? So that's basically what we're saying here. Do you have visibility over exposures and risks across the attack surface? And when you think about identity, threat detection, response, network, and cloud, those collectively provide that answer. Provide the answer to, okay, what does my organization look like from an attacker's point of view? ITDR, NDR, obviously the payoff being, okay, let's monitor attack techniques, protect identity and access controls, detect attacks that are occurring, and enable fast remediation. That's what the payoff is of, or the value driver that Gartner highlights in the hype cycle. So from a coverage perspective, if we're talking about attack surface coverage, if we're talking about threat visibility across domains, clearly the near-term benefit and the highest value is rooted in one of the threat detection or these threat detection and response capabilities. So from a coverage perspective, think, okay, what threat detection and response capabilities do I need to bring into my organization to have that coverage? Clarity. Again, staying true to the problem, the unknown. We don't know where we're compromised right now. The pain set that Gartner highlights is prioritization of discovered issues. Right? So to ensure security can detect and respond to those, right? Given the attack surface is dynamic. So given we need coverage for a dynamic attack surface, okay, now we need clarity around what threats matter. Again, many different paths to this. So again, we focused on the 2 to 5 year horizon because that is the near-term value. Which ones displayed in Gartner's perspective, the highest impact, right? And those we bolded again. And if you can see, identity threat detection and response, network threat detection and response, digital risk management, breach and attack simulation, vulnerability prioritization were all highlighted. Now, as a threat detection and response company, we think about, okay, what ultimately is the payoff here? What's the value to outcome? And we think of it as like unified context, right? So you have context of attacks across attack surfaces, right? We talk about coverage, you have threat visibility. Now it's about threat context. So if you get that unified visibility from threat detection and response, you also get that unified context across identity, network, and cloud. Answering the question, how should my organization find and prioritize the issues that attackers will see first and attackers have already taken advantage of or that unknown compromise? Unifying this context, and we think threat detection and response capabilities, whether it's on the identity layer or the network layer or the cloud layer, unifying that context will ultimately decrease noise, increase fidelity, right? So that reduces tuning, triage, burnout, et cetera, speeds your time to detect, investigate, and respond. So when we think about the second key, right, you've got coverage. Do you have threat visibility across your domains, across your attack surface? Now, great, yes, I do. Now I need clarity. Okay, which ones matter most to the business? Which technologies are going to deliver the context I need to prioritize the threats that matter, and do it in a way that doesn't burn out the team, right? That doesn't create more noise, that doesn't require a lot of tuning, right? So clarity, and at Vectra, we think about this. How do we continue to not only provide more coverage, but how do we continue to hone in on clarity? We also talk, interesting enough, and you'll see, like, as I go through these 5, they're all interwoven. It's like you can't buy something, or you can't rely on something just that gives you coverage. You need, in order to get clarity, you need coverage, right? In order to go into the next one, controls, you need clarity, right? So again, staying true to the problem set. We don't know where we're compromised right now. The pain that Gartner highlights in the hype cycle is We struggle to prioritize risk reduction actions, leaving gaps where they feel they have less control. So this is like voice of customer, voice of all of you, and how Gartner kind of summed this up. It's like, what do we, okay, now that we've got coverage, we've got clarity, now what control do we have, right? Do we put in place? What processes, what remediation, what workflows do we automate, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we looked at the paths. We looked at what Gartner highlighted as having the highest near-term impact. And once again, the threat detection and response categories fit this area. And we talk about this in terms of like control, unified control, right? So how do we fundamentally help security teams, SOC teams, regain control of attacks in progress, right? See them sooner, et cetera. See them before the complete narrative attack as they progress, right? Before they progress too far, et cetera. Fundamentally, the payoff is to answer that question, that third key question that Gartner highlights in the hype cycle. What would happen if an attacker carried out a campaign? How would our defenses cope, et cetera? This is all about seizing control. This is all about taking that coverage, the threat visibility across your domains, knowing what threats matter, the prioritization that comes with clarity, high fidelity signal, low noise, et cetera, less burnout. Okay, great. Now, how do we regain control? Right, so fundamentally in the threat detection and response space, XDR, ITDR, NDR, CDR, you name it, fundamentally threat detection and response is about, okay, getting ahead of attacks, right? Unifying attack control across those domains. Coverage, clarity, control. All the first kind of three key pillars of XDR, the three key pillars of addressing this core problem set of we don't know where we're compromised right now, what we call the unknown. Which brings us to the fourth key, complexity. Right, so go back to the problem set, the unknown. We don't know where we're compromised right now. The pain that comes through in the hype cycle is, okay, are we efficiently and effectively using our budgeting and resourcing? Right, so meaning, are we, we think about this as especially the words efficient and effective. The worst thing for efficiency and effectiveness is complexity. So in our minds, it's how do you reduce complexity? How do you reduce complexity in not only what the SOC individuals or teams need to do from a people perspective, but how do you remove complexity in process? And how do you remove complexity in technology? Again, here's where we said, okay, now let's take the 2 to 5 year horizon. Let's take the highest impact near-term benefit for security, and let's lay it all out against these three pillars of that we called out as the pillars of XDR. Coverage, clarity, and control. So if we can all agree that the pillars of XDR, the pillars of better threat detection and response are coverage, clarity, and control, when you map that against the categories or technology categories in the hype cycle, you begin to see, okay, which ones check all the boxes? Which technologies are designed to give me coverage, which designed to give me clarity, and which ones are designed to give me more control over threats and attacks in process. And as you can see, all three boxes are checked for largely ITDR and NDR, which includes cloud detection and response. The payoff here from a complexity standpoint is an opportunity to unify threat detection and response in a single platform. This is fundamentally the promise of XDR, right? Fundamentally, better TDR, aka in our minds XDR, is about unifying this coverage, clarity, and control in one platform, right? So when you think about consolidating identity, network, cloud with existing EDR in one platform, you're speeding deployment, implementation, threat management, and then fundamentally, can it deliver value in a short amount of time? And that's that efficiency and effectiveness that we're after, right? That's that complexity reduction. If you reduce complexity, you can increase efficiency and effectiveness. So coverage is the first. Do I have threat visibility across my domains, my attack surface? Clarity, do I know which threats matter? Controls, do I have the people process to ensure that I am responding or remediating to those prioritized threats as quickly as possible? 4, am I doing it in a way that reduces complexity? Right? Where am I going to invest that is also going to deliver coverage, clarity, and control, but also reduce complexity, help me be more efficient, effective, deliver near-term value to the business? Which brings us to the 4th, competency, right? So staying true to the problem, we don't know where we're compromised right now. The pain that comes through is, and this is not surprising, but the pain that comes through is, do I have the skill sets and staff to respond to attacks, right? To detect, investigate, and respond to attacks as quickly as possible. And Gartner calls out a couple key things in terms of like lack of resources. As I'm sure everyone is on the call here is familiar with this. I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but I look at, okay, relative to that problem set, do I have the skill sets? What near-term, high-impact investment addresses that pain? And that's MDR, right? So it's the only one in that area that is called out as, okay, relative to that pain, this is the highest impact, nearest term benefit. And I'm sure we're all familiar with and all looking at, obviously, MDR. So payoff, I need skills, right? I need skills, and I also need reinforcements, ability to operate 24/7 by 365. So when we think about better threat detection and response, AKA XDR, do I also have the ability to build and or augment my SOC, right? Building expertise with my existing analysts, adding expertise in incident response, threat hunting, threat analysis, red teaming, you name it. The right MDR can deliver this and help with addressing this with the skills challenge and obviously what we call, at the end of the day, are we competent, right? Do we have what it takes to be successful in deploying, implementing, operating, managing our XDR strategy, aka better threat detection and response? Which brings us to the 4th, confidence. Right, so relative to the problem set, the unknown, we don't know where we're compromised right now. Coverage, threat visibility across attack surface. I have visibility to threats across my attack surface. Clarity, I know what threats matter to the business, the ones that need to be prioritized, the ones that require human attention, right? Control, I have the process, I have the people, I have the integrations, I have what it takes to seize control of that attack and stop it. Competency, I have the people that I need and the skill set I need to remediate, to detect, investigate, and ultimately respond and remediate that attack. And that yields confidence. So the pain here that we called out or kind of found in the hype cycle centered on effective and measurable positive impact to the risk profile of the business. Am I increasing the risk, bettering, improving the risk posture of the organization, right? And we actually did research on this end of last year. We published a report surveying many people like yourselves and security leaders and SOC leaders. And these are the 3 kind of big stats that jumped out at us and kind of why we exist. Nearly 3/4 of leaders think they've been breached and don't know it. We've talked about that one. 8 out of 10, nearly 8 out of 10 think that vendor tools fail to live up to their promise, and 8 out of 10 think traditional approaches don't work for modern threats. So delivering effective and measurable positive impact on the risk profile of the business, that data screams, we need better threat detection and response, right? No wonder many of you are looking at XDR as a path to that, thinking about an XDR strategy. How does that XDR strategy unfold? Vector's perspective, the near-term path to that is just simply, hey, we need better threat detection and response across our attack surfaces. We need that coverage, clarity, control, and competency. Where we see it, where we can get it, where we can deliver it, is identity threat detection, network detection response, and cloud detection and response, and then obviously wrapping managed detection and response around that. The ultimate payoff of confidence, of having the confidence that you can get ahead and stay ahead of attackers, is you're covered across the entire attack surface. You have accurate threat signal, confidence in threat signal. And the way we see it, it's confidence that security teams can seize control, turn the tables on attackers, get ahead and stay ahead of attacks. That's key to confidence. So, quick summary. 5 keys as we see it. This is how we've dissected the hype cycle. Reading between the lines, understanding that, the problem set is a diverse set of attacks, evolving attack surface, expanding attack surface, evolving attacker methods, etc. Comes down to these 5 things, right? Better coverage, better clarity, better control, reducing complexity, increasing competency. If you do these 5 things, you're going to increase confidence that you can defend against attacks as they evolve. So coverage, first big takeaway. To an attacker, there's one interconnected attack surface. So how do we begin to think like an attacker, see what an attacker sees, right? You're going to get that through unifying your threat visibility across the attack surfaces. Clarity. Let's face it, attackers are evasive. They're always going to find holes. How do we build a threat detection response platform that sees what attackers see and unify that context so that we can prioritize the ones that matter, right, as they progress. Control. You have more attack surface, you have more attacker methods. Do attackers have the upper hand? How does a threat detection response platform put the SOC in control, integrating and automating processes and workflows? Complexity. More attack surface and more evasive attackers does not necessarily mean more complexity, right? How does a unified threat detection response platform reduce complexity and deliver value in the near term? Competency, how do we keep pace, right? How do we build expertise? How do we augment resources for the SOC, 24/7, et cetera, and help build those skills? Do these 5 things, you'll be confident that you can get ahead and stay ahead of attackers. So that's how we kind of thought through and read through the hype cycle, kind of rooted it in the core problem, found these 5 keys to be pivotal to kind of developing and implementing what we call better threat detection response. What I would equate that to XDR. And at this point, there's a couple of things I want to call out. There's a ton of information in our YouTube channel, so subscribe to that. We go into more depth on the actual platform and the product, and different use cases. There's some great customer videos out there as well. So I encourage everyone to get to know Vectra even more, subscribing to our YouTube channel. I think we're constantly publishing videos, which is fantastic. That's it. That's us in a nutshell, and kind of our takeaways from the hype cycle. And at this point, I'm gonna open it up to Q&A. So let's see if we've got any questions. Here's a good one. relative to cloud detection and response, where do we see cloud security posture management and CDR overlapping or whatnot? Well, that's a good question. I think that they solve two different problems, right? So cloud security posture management is about fundamentally where are we exposed right now, where are we vulnerable. Cloud detection and response is where are we compromised. Now, we would argue you need both. You need to know, to improve risk posture, you need to know, obviously, A, where you're exposed, but B, also attackers' methods. They're constantly evolving, extremely evasive. They're always going to find a way in, is our perspective. Solving for that unknown compromise is critical. So that, our perspective, they go hand in hand. It's a great question. Another one says, this is a good one. Vectra does not do EDR, so are you really an XDR? We don't position ourselves as an XDR, but if we stay true to the definition of what problem are we ultimately trying to solve, what problem is XDR ultimately trying to solve, and if you think, regardless of who the technology vendor is and whatnot, fundamentally we see XDR as hey, better coverage, better clarity, better control, and we see that as better threat detection and response. So no, we don't have an agent. We don't do endpoint detection and response, but we do cover the other four major attack surfaces: public cloud, SaaS, identity, and network. And we integrate with our friends on the EDR side. So when you think about it, we think about it as the problem set, like the bigger attack surface to cover, and how do we do it in a way that delivers better threat detection and response. So integrations with our EDR friends is critical there. This question always seems to pop up. The copy of the presentation, we can make this available. Feel free to ping me. I know if the resources thing isn't working, here's my emails up on screen there, LinkedIn, whatever is easiest for you. And I'll get you a copy of this or any of the other resources that we have highlighted. Or if you have questions or comments or feedback, always happy to take that as well. So with that, thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening in. And until next time, have a great day. Thank you.